maybe especially in this kind of Instagram, TikTok culture, we're getting everyone's highlight reels. People are trying to put forward the very best possible version of themselves, and it gives us a slanted, dishonest view of others, right? We get the whole story of ourselves and maybe an embellished story on the negative side of ourselves while we look at everyone's highlight reel. And then, of course, we would come to a place where we feel that way.
Understand what the journey is. We've got to prepare ourselves for it. We've got to be willing to go on the whole journey. And we've got to learn and grow as we do it, because what we learn from our parents, what we learn from school, like that is not going to help us in this domain. So that's where I think people are getting stuck. If that's a good enough answer.
Totally. Well, I hear you talking about shame, and self-worth. And I think almost everyone in the world is walking around with some version of I'm not good enough. And not all the same. I don't think we all have the exact same package in terms of, the mess we were born into, with whatever our parents' unfinished stuff is, or the journey that we've been on so far. But as you say, I don't think anyone gets off the hook. I think maybe especially in this kind of Instagram, TikTok culture, we're getting everyone's highlight reels. People are trying to put forward the very best possible version of themselves, and it gives us a slanted, dishonest view of others, right? We get the whole story of ourselves and maybe an embellished story on the negative side of ourselves while we look at everyone's highlight reel. And then, of course, we would come to a place where we feel that way. For you, what's the best way to approach and work with those pieces of shame that I think, again, everyone has some version of, but not exactly the same, right? They might have a different genesis point, or there might be certain domains where we feel good enough, and then other domains where we feel like we just don't belong. How do you work with people around that piece?
So there are really two major elements to my approach. One is what I would call like the identity element, and then one is what I would call the somatic element. I think they're both important. So the identity element is how I think about myself, how I feel. It's like basically who I believe I am, right? Like when I look in the mirror in the morning, who do I think is looking back at me, right? Like that's the identity. And, to touch on the shame and the unworthiness, it's like most of our identities are wrapped up with shame and unworthiness. And I think if you don't live in this work, if you don't do this all the time, like it's kind of difficult to understand like why that is or how that happens. But I've often used the example. It's like if you're a child and you steal a cookie from the cookie, and then your parent comes and like yells at you for it. Right. And like that child was so innocent, right? That child was so innocent, like just wanted a cookie. Like there's nothing more innocent than a child wanting a cookie. Right. And so you go and you steal that cookie out of the cookie jar with this, like just the joy of being a child and the innocence of, wanting a cookie. And then you get yelled at for it. And the contrast between I just wanted a cookie and now I'm getting yelled at for it. It's like, wait, it's like in the mind of a child, it's like, what the hell is happening right now? And the only way we can really reconcile that is to go, there must be something wrong with it. And I'm using a very basic example right now, but like think about like when you showed your parents your report card, or think about when you were told to go to your room, or think about when you blew something up in the microwave and, your parents yelled at you or whatever, right? Like just think about these experiences that we go through. That there's a movement now about conscious parenting. And I think so many modern parents are really being present to how do we raise our children to not damage them? But that was not a movement in our generation. And it was like kids got beat, kids got yelled at, kids got grounded, kids got punished. And I'm not saying that we should never discipline our children, but like the way it was handled then is very different than the way it's being handled now. And now a lot of people are still handling it that way. But I think we've got to recognize that we were raised in a certain culture that used shame as a control method, right? Like our parents shamed us into being the children that they thought we were supposed to be. And their parents did that to them. And so we are being brought up in a culture of shame and unworthiness. And by the time you reach adulthood, it is already there, right? And so the identity aspect, going back to the question, is about reframing that identity, right? It's about starting to recognize, okay, I have a history that has taught me one thing about myself. Now I need to start teaching myself something new about. I need to start to recognize my gifts, my attributes, the things that make me amazing, my talents. I've got to start like really using those in a powerful way and really seeing myself in the world, being an amazing person, and really start to create this identity like, wow, I'm amazing. Like, wow, I'm a catch. Like somebody would be lucky to be with me. Like we have to actively create that identity. And that's the first part. The second part is the somatic piece. And this is like, it's more subconscious because it lives in the body, not in the mind, right? So the identity is more conscious. We're more aware of the self-talk or the things we think about ourselves. Like we're very present to that. The somatic stuff, we're not so present to. It lives inside of us, but we don't think about it. We don't talk about it. It's just there. And it feels like a tension. It feels like a heaviness. It feels like when, we get triggered, it feels like an intense reaction in our body. In those moments when you're acting crazy and you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, but you're doing it anyway, and you can't stop yourself, it's like that's when your body has taken over. That's when these limiting impressions from your past are overriding your conscious mind and like making your choices for you. And so we've got to reframe the identity, and we've also got to move the old energy out of the body. And so there are lots of ways, like there are lots of methods, and maybe we can get into some of that, but just in a nutshell, like those are really the two things that need to happen, right? You need to create this new identity. You need to get rid of whatever it is that you're carrying in your body in terms of weight and stagnant energy and trauma, so you can finally feel free in your life. And then from that place, you're really ready to move forward and empower.
Got it. Yeah, and I think some people are probably already nodding their head and really getting what you're talking about. Other people might be going, So maybe could you say, like, what's one thing that you think someone who wants to start to work with more positive, healthy, connected sense of self, what could they start to do that would make a difference? And in terms of moving the somatic piece and allowing us to kind of discharge and dissipate long-held pieces in our body that are kind of holding the whole kind of constellation of trauma and unmet need in place. So like one for each.
Yeah. So for the somatic piece, I'll just give a really, really simple practice. And I mean, look, I'll just say this by saying, like, I've done trainings where like we literally like screamed it out and like beat pillows and stuff, right? And I've done intense breath work where we would like breathe intensely for like a full 2 hours. And so the realm of somatic work is huge in terms of the different ways we can actually work this stuff out of our bodies. But I'm going to give a really simple practice. Is you can do it anytime. It doesn't really take more than 5 minutes. And actually, if you've never done anything before and you started to practice this for like 5 minutes a day and maybe increasing it to 10 or 15 minutes over time, like you would start to feel so free inside your body. And all you got to do is just sit still. If you sit in like a meditation pose or some kind of comfortable pose where you just sit still and you just like do a body scan, right? From head to toe, you just do a body scan and you just notice any significant sensations in your body. Like I know for me, like I always hold my tension like right here on my shoulder line. It's just like 100% of the time when I like start checking in, that's where it is. Like I just feel it right there. Right? Some people say like, I always feel a knot in my stomach, or I always feel a knot in my throat, or I feel like a shortness of breath, like I can't get a full breath. So there are different kinds of things you might feel, but whatever it is for you is what you want to pay attention to. And so you just start to check in. You start to notice wherever you feel the tension, the tightness, the resistance inside your body, like a physical sensation. And then you just breathe into that place with big, deep breaths. And you kind of visualize, like in my shoulders, for example, I might visualize like energy just kind of rising up off my shoulders, like just kind of moving out of my shoulders, right? Or you might visualize, like if it's in your chest, you feel like a tightness in your chest, you might visualize like an expansion, right? Like just imagine that tightness in your chest just opening up and expanding. But you're breathing into that place in your body, like very intentionally focused, breathing into that specific spot in your body, visualizing the opening, the release, the expansion. And again, if you practice this for 5 minutes a day, like you will systematically release stagnant energy from your body every single day. And you do that for 30 days, you will feel completely different inside your body. Like, I'd be willing to bet, like, you will let go of chronic pain you've had, like, just because all of the pain, the headaches, the migraines, like, it all comes from the stuff we're carrying in our body. In terms of identity, a simple practice that I've had recommended to me many times over the years is, like, sit down and make a list of like 50 things that are amazing about you. Right. And like, you imagine like writing out 50 things that are amazing about you. Like that's a lot. Like, it's to really sit there and dig that deep and like find oh, I love this about myself. I love this about myself. If you were to do that every day, you make some time in the morning to just make a list. It doesn't even have to be 50 things. Start with 20 things, right? But just every day, it's like starting to direct your self-thought and your self-talk in a different way. Because most of us, I mean, I'm sure your listeners will notice this about themselves. It's like you do something and your immediate response is, oh, I'm such an idiot. Or, oh, what the fuck is wrong with me? Or why did I do that? Or when will I ever learn? Right. And it's like, we've got to start to move that in a different direction. Like, that can't be the most automatic thing.